I had a look at this specifically and I found a bit of a bug here, and I'm talking about any of the JK BMS, any of them, the B series, the PB series, it doesn't matter. Yeah, and again, this is not correct, and this is not correct. Yeah. Good morning, my friends. Welcome back to the Off-Grid Garage and house here in sunny Austria. Got a little bit of cloud here, and this is actually perfect to spread the sunlight equally across all my solar panels, which would be otherwise totally shaded. And we have like 23 amps outside. Nice. Alright, my friends, in today's video we want to have a look at the JK-Inverter BMS again. There's a new firmware 19.34. It was just coming out and I want to show you what the features are. I have prepared a battery here with the version 19 inverter BMS already. It is the do-it-yourself box with a 314 ampere hour battery inside, and I've already upgraded the BMS to the version 19.34. So we are now connected with the JK BMS monitor software to this BMS. Let's have a look under About. It is a 200 amp inverter BMS and it is running 19.34. I just had a look in the settings and I cannot see these new functions here in the computer software. So I think at the moment it is only available on the app, but not here on the computer software. So let me start the version 5 of the mobile app and we go to the do-it-yourself kit. We log in, we go to settings. So let's just quickly confirm you're on the same page. Yep, 19.34, there it is. And we go to settings. Let's type in the password. So we've got access to all the settings. And we go a little bit further down in the settings. I think we have to go... Yeah, here it is. So these settings, they are at the bottom of all the settings, yeah, under the dry contact parameters. We can now see we've got 3 more settings, parameters to set. One of them is the state of charge calibration in percent. You can now enter a manual state of charge, which the BMS will be happy to take over then. So whenever you think your JK BMS is highly out of whack, you can enter manually a state of charge for this battery now. Yeah, it's currently 26%. We can see this here on the computer software as well, 26. If I think, well, this is more like 45%, I click on OK, and we can see here in the computer software as well, it jumps up to 45%. So manually setting your state of charge, this is probably important for people who are not regularly charging their batteries during winter time, and the state of charge of your BMS goes bananas. Yeah, you can now override this with whatever you estimate, and then once fully charged, the battery will automatically recalibrate and reset again to 100% then. The second new parameter is the state of health we can now set. It sits on 95%. I've put this in manually. Do we have this here somewhere as well? Yes, maybe. Maybe not. I don't think it shows here in the computer software the state of health. And it's interesting. The computer software doesn't seem to show the state of health of your battery. At least I cannot see it at the moment. Maybe it's there somewhere. Well, anyway, you can set this now to anything you think your battery is at. And why would you need that? Because if you are going to replace your BMS at some stage, the new BMS will start at 100% because it sees the battery for the very first time and starts with 100% state of health. But if your battery is already 5 years old, it is not at 100% anymore. So you can actually tell the new BMS then, my battery is not at 100%, it is only at 98% or 95 or 90% or even lower. Is there a limit? 50% is the limit. Yeah, you probably don't use your battery anymore if it's under 50% state of health, right? So there's now the possibility to set this manual as well. Fantastic. And last but not least, the cycle capacity calibration in ampere hours. We can now set the cycles and the cycle capacity manually as well. And this is again important if you replace your BMS or if you upgrade your BMS from a version 14, 15 to a version 19. You can now set the battery cycles and the cycle capacity manually here through the app. I had a look at this specifically and I found a bit of a bug here because this is actually not the cycle capacity. Because what is the definition of a cycle? Well, a cycle is a full discharge and a full charge. Yeah, you're using 314 ampere hour to discharge and 314 ampere hours to charge. This is one cycle. And I'm not only talking about the version 19 BMS, and I'm talking about any of the JK BMS, any of them, the B series, the PB series, it doesn't matter. Yeah, they don't really count the cycle capacity or the cycle count. They rather count how much ampere hours has been discharged from the battery. So they are never counting any ampere hours going into the battery. Let me show you this here at an example, battery number 1, for example. Yeah, when we log in there, that's the version 19. That's the top shelf battery with the BMS. You can see we have got the cycle capacity of 7,279.7 ampere hours. We are charging the battery with 18 amps. Yeah, and while I'm talking to you now here, you will not see the cycle capacity changing. Yeah, it should go to 0.8, 0.9, and so on, but it does not count positive current, charge current into the battery. Only the discharge current is counted. See, it is not changing. Yeah, it should change every 10-15 seconds or so, but it will stay at 0.7 ampere hours for the rest of the day until we start discharging the battery, and then it starts counting again. You can check this out with your own BMS, and you will find charge current is not counted for in the cycle capacity. So it is not really a cycle capacity, it is only a discharge capacity what you are measuring here. Okay, let's go back to the do-it-yourself battery. Go to settings. As you can see here on the screen, I have set now 300 ampere hours here for this battery. This is the cycle capacity the BMS has done, and the cycle count is on 0 at the moment. Yeah, 0 cycles at 300 ampere hours of cycle capacity. That is fine, because we've got a 314 ampere hour battery. So if I set this one to 313, 1 ampere hour less than the actual capacity, and go on OK, it changes there, and we still have 0 cycles done with this battery. If I change it to 314 though, go OK, we've got 1 cycle. And this is not correct. Yeah. At the moment, with 314 ampere hours cycle capacity, I have only completely discharged my battery, but I have not charged it again. So there's no full cycle. This is only half of the cycle. So to charge the battery, we need another 314 ampere hours on top. Yeah, that makes 628. So if we go to 627, 1 ampere hour short, and I click on OK, we still have 1 cycle. We still have 1 cycle. But we've got 627 ampere hours. So if I go one further, 628, and go on OK, we've got 2 cycles now. Yeah, and again, this is not correct, because the BMS thinks the cycle capacity is discharged ampere hours, not charged and discharged. While from a logical perspective, if we have cycled this battery with 628 ampere hours, so discharging 314 and charging 314, that would be 1 full cycle. But the BMS shows already 2 cycles now. So you need to be aware, whatever you enter in the app for the cycle capacity calibration ampere hours is only half of what you normally would cycle your battery with. And I don't know why they have done this, because they are counting discharged and charged ampere hours. They just need to add them together into one number, and then you would have the real cycle capacity in ampere hours, and not just the discharged capacity in ampere hours. So I'm logging in back to the top shelf battery in the battery shelf, and we can see here a cycle capacity of 7,279.7. See, it has not changed, even we are charging the battery all the time now. Yeah, and we have a cycle count of 23. So if you do the maths and do 7,279 divided by 304 ampere hours of this battery in the top shelf battery there, we've got a cycle count of 23.9, so 23 cycles and almost another cycle. But it only shows the full numbers in front of the comma, not the fraction of a cycle. So that's fine. So when you do the maths here, that's fine. Yeah, that works actually. You've got the cycle capacity and the cycle count, and it works out. If I divide the cycle capacity by the battery capacity, we are getting the real cycle count, yeah, 23. But it is not correct, because a cycle is not 304 ampere hours. It is 608 ampere hours for this battery. 1 discharge, 1 full charge, 1 cycle. So what Jikong is doing here, they're assuming When you discharge your battery by 304 ampere hours, you also need to charge the battery at some stage again with 304 ampere hours to make it full, yeah? And then it is one full cycle. So in theory, they don't need to count the ampere hours going into the battery again, because this logically need to be the same as you have discharged the battery with. So from this logic, it makes sense, but it is a bit misleading to call this a cycle capacity, because it is not. So when your battery shows you 7,280 ampere hours of cycle capacity, it has actually done twice as much. Yeah, this is only discharge, yeah, but you have also charged the battery again with the same capacity. So you would have actually 14,558 ampere hours. That is your real cycle capacity. Yeah, you're discharging your battery with 304 ampere hours, and you're charging a battery again with 304 ampere hours. Makes 608. So if you divide this number by 608, you're getting the 23 cycles again. So from there, it is not a mathematical issue to do that. It is more just from a logical perspective. It is not quite correct to call this a cycle capacity. It is more a discharge cycle capacity or something there. So just keep this in mind. If you look at this number and say, oh, my battery has only done 7,280 ampere hours of cycling. No, this is only discharging. You need to double this amount because you have also charged the battery at some stage, of course. So with these three new parameters and settings, you can actually now calibrate your BMS, especially if you're going to replace your BMS with a newer one, with a different one. You can take note of these three parameters and enter them in the new BMS again. So it continues monitoring your battery accurately. Same state of charge, same state of health, and same cycles. So that's actually pretty good that Jikong has listened to the community once again, because many people have complained about this. Well, and if your BMS is faulty for whatever reason and you cannot access these data anymore, you can still do an estimate and enter some estimated numbers. It is still better than starting from scratch and from zero again. So yeah, my friends, I think that's all this. We can have. So this new firmware 19.34 comes with all the different variants for all your BMSs, 100, 150, 200 and 300 amp BMS. And we want to have a quick look at the release log as well. Yeah, this new firmware has been released end of May already. So it says after continuous discharge, short circuit protection locks the discharge. It no longer retains the locked state, allowing restart to release the lock. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds like there was a problem with the BMS not unlocking anymore after a short current detection. Certainly this is nothing I can test here, so I'm not 100% sure what that means, but obviously it is fixed. And then it is added state of charge calibration, battery capacity calibration, and cycle capacity calibration. It is actually the discharge cycle capacity calibration. Allows users to replace a faulty battery BMS with a new one. Yeah, this is exactly what we have just talked about. So it lets you take over the parameters of the old BMS and enter them in the new one. Alright, my friends, as always, I link all this information down below. You can download this firmware for the version 19 BMS only. It is not for any other BMS from Jikong. It is only for the JK-Inverter BMS version 19. Newest version at the moment, 19.34. If you are using more than 16 BMS at the moment and using the 19.31b, which can handle up to 32 JK BMS in parallel, you cannot use this software here because this 19.34 version has not been modified yet to work with more than 16 BMS. I think this will come shortly. We will have a 19.34b. And you can use the internal device address again in the app or the software here to set all your BMS and talk to them. If you haven't seen the video about the 19.31b, I'll link this down below. So the firmware 19.31b doesn't use the dip switches anymore in front of the BMS. It uses the internal software set device addresses through the app or the computer software. It is all linked down below, as well as the newest JK BMS monitor 3.11 and the newest mobile app. It is all linked down below. I'm still getting a few emails where people ask where they can download all this stuff. It is all on my website, linked under the videos on my website, because Jikong is not publishing the firmware, the computer software, or the Android app themselves. Thank you very, very much for over 124,131 subscribers here on the channel. Welcome to everyone new, and welcome back to all the existing subscribers, of course. Without all your support, these videos wouldn't be possible, so thank you very, very much. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, smash a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Leave a nice comment down below. This all helps the channel out and is a fantastic support. Thank you very much for that. Alright my friends, until the next video, you stay charged, stay safe, and thanks again for watching. See you then. Bye bye.